The gunshot echoed across the plains as Victoria Flanders clutched her husband's cold hand, the spring of 1875 turning suddenly bitter in the New Mexico territory. Blood seeped into the parched earth beneath Thomas Flanders's body, his eyes fixed on the endless blue sky he would never see again. "Thomas, please," Victoria whispered, her voice breaking as she pressed her palm against the wound in his chest. "Please don't leave me." But her plea fell on deaf ears as the light faded from his eyes. The stagecoach robbery had happened so quickly, masked men, demands for valuables, and Thomas, brave and foolish, had reached for his gun. "Madam, they're gone now." The driver's voice sounded distant, unreal. "I'm sorry about your husband." Victoria couldn't tear her eyes away from Thomas's face. Only hours ago, he had been smiling, talking about their future in Silver Creek, the little town where they'd planned to open a general store. Now that future had vanished like morning mist in the desert sun. "The nearest town is about 15 miles north," the driver continued. "We need to get moving before those bandits circle back." "I can't leave him," Victoria said, her throat tight with unshed tears. "We can take him with us, madam. Give him a proper burial when we reach Silver Creek." Victoria nodded numbly, her mind unable to process the sudden, violent shift in her world. 26 years old and newly widowed in a land she barely knew. As the driver and another passenger lifted Thomas's body into the coach, she stared at the bloodstain on the ground, wondering how life could change so completely in the space of a heartbeat. The journey to Silver Creek passed in a blur of dust and grief. Victoria sat beside her husband's body, wrapped hastily in a blanket, her hand resting on his chest where no heartbeat stirred. Outside the window, the vast landscape of mesas and canyons stretched to the horizon, indifferent to her suffering. By the time they arrived in Silver Creek, twilight was painting the small town in shades of purple and gold. Victoria stepped down from the coach, her legs unsteady, her eyes red-rimmed from silent tears. The local sheriff, alerted by the driver, approached with his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Flanders, I'm Sheriff Wilson. I'm mighty sorry for your loss." Victoria nodded, unable to form words. "We'll take care of your husband's remains. Do you have somewhere to stay?" She glanced toward the coach where men were carefully removing Thomas's body. "We were coming to open a store. Thomas bought a property on Main Street with living quarters above." The sheriff nodded. "I know the place. Let me take you there and get you settled." The building that was supposed to represent their fresh start stood empty and forlorn in the gathering darkness. Sheriff Wilson unlocked the door and lit a lamp, revealing a dusty room with bare shelves and a counter. "It's not much right now," he said, "but there's furniture upstairs at least. The previous owner left some things behind." Victoria stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. "Thank you, Sheriff. Mrs. Peterson from the boarding house will bring you some food. Funeral will likely be day after tomorrow, once the preacher returns from Tucson." He hesitated at the door. "Those bandits will do our best to catch them." After the sheriff left, Victoria climbed the narrow stairs to the living quarters. A simple bedroom, kitchen, and sitting area greeted her spaces that should have been filled with Thomas's laughter and their shared dreams. She sank onto the bed, finally allowing the tears to flow freely, her sobs the only sound in the empty building. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through windows without curtains. Victoria had barely slept, her mind replaying the robbery over and over. She washed her face in the basin of water Mrs. Peterson had brought the night before, then dressed in her black traveling dress, now wrinkled and dusty. A knock at the door downstairs drew her from her thoughts. She made her way down to find a round-faced woman with kind eyes waiting. "Mrs. Flanders, I'm Maggie Peterson. I brought you some breakfast and fresh clothes." Victoria accepted the basket with murmured thanks. "Such a terrible thing to happen," Maggie said, shaking her head. "If you need anything at all, my boarding house is just down the street." After Maggie left, Victoria forced herself to eat a biscuit, knowing she needed strength. Then, almost without conscious thought, she began cleaning the store space. Physical labor seemed the only escape from the crushing weight of her grief. By midday, she had swept the floors and wiped down the shelves. Standing in the center of the room, she looked around at the empty space that represented their dream, Thomas's dream. The shipment of goods they had ordered would arrive in a week. What would she do then? She had no knowledge of running a store. Their savings would last a few months at most. Another knock interrupted her thoughts. A man stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair was flecked with silver at the temples, and a neatly trimmed beard shadowed his jaw. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and respectful. "Name Samuel Easton, town blacksmith. Heard about what happened to your husband. Came to offer my condolences." Victoria nodded stiffly. "Thank you, Mr. Easton. Folks call me Sam." He glanced around the store. "Sheriff mentioned you were planning to open a general store." "Yes, that was the plan." Her voice caught on the last word. Sam shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "If you need any help getting set up, I'd be happy to lend a hand. My forge is just down the street." Victoria looked at him, this stranger offering kindness when she felt utterly alone. "That's very kind, but I'm not sure I'll be staying." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps disappointment. "Well, the offer stands if you change your mind." He settled his hat back on his head. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Flanders." After he left, Victoria returned to her cleaning, but her mind kept drifting to the blacksmith. There had been genuine concern in his eyes, not just the obligatory pity she'd seen from others. The following day brought Thomas's funeral. The small cemetery overlooked the town, with views of the distant mountains. Victoria stood alone as they lowered the simple pine coffin into the ground. Sheriff Wilson, Maggie Peterson, and a handful of townspeople gathered at a respectful distance. The preacher spoke words about a man he had never known, about God's plan and eternal rest. As the first shovelful of dirt hit the coffin, Victoria felt a presence beside her. Sam Easton stood there, hat clutched in his hands, his face solemn. He didn't speak, didn't offer platitudes, just stood as a silent support as earth covered the man she had loved. When it was over, and the small crowd began to disperse, Sam finally spoke. "Would you like me to walk you back to town?" Victoria nodded, grateful for the companionship, however brief. They walked in silence until they reached her store. At the door, Victoria turned to him. "Thank you, Mr. Easton." "Sam," he corrected gently. "Sam." She managed a small, sad smile. "Thank you for being there." "No one should stand alone at a time like that." His eyes held hers for a moment. "I lost my wife 5 years ago. Influenza. I know something of what you're feeling." The revelation surprised her. This connection of shared grief made him suddenly more than just a kind stranger. "I'm sorry for your loss as well." He nodded, then gestured to the store. "Your shipment of goods arrives soon?" "Next week. I'm not sure what I'll do with it all." "Do you know anything about running a store?" Victoria sighed. "Thomas handled all that. I was going to learn from him." "This town needs a good general store," Sam said. "Last one closed when old man Jenkins died last winter. Folks have been riding all the way to Santa Fe for supplies. I don't see how I could possibly manage it alone." Sam looked at her thoughtfully. "People would help you if you decided to stay. Silver Creek takes care of its own." "I'm hardly one of your own. I've been here 3 days, and one of them was to bury my husband." "You're Thomas Flanders' widow. That makes you one of us." He replaced his hat. "Think on it, Mrs. Flanders, and remember my offer to help stands." Over the next few days, Victoria found herself doing just that thinking. The practical matters of survival pushed through her grief. She had limited funds, no family back east to return to, and a building that was paid for. The alternative, selling everything at a loss and starting over somewhere else, seemed daunting. When the shipment arrived, it was Sam who organized a group of men to unload the crates and barrels. Victoria stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the volume of goods, fabric, tools, canned foods, medicines, ammunition, and dozens of other items she couldn't identify. "How am I supposed to know what to do with all this?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Sam overheard her. "One step at a time," he said, setting down a heavy crate. "First, we unpack. Then we organize. Pricing comes later." "We?" Victoria questioned. "If you'll accept my help." His eyes held that same steady gaze that had comforted her at the funeral. Victoria looked around at the chaos of crates. "I would be grateful for any assistance." Sam nodded. "I'll come by after I close the forge each day. We'll have you ready to open in no time." True to his word, Sam arrived that evening, sleeves rolled up and ready to work. Together, they unpacked crates, arranged goods on shelves, and created a system for inventory. Victoria found herself watching him as he worked, noticing the careful way he handled delicate items despite his large, blacksmith's hands. "How did you learn all this?" she asked as he explained how to organize the merchandise for easy access. "My father ran a trading post near Fort Laramie when I was growing up," Sam explained. "I worked there until I was 18, then apprenticed with a blacksmith." "What brought you to Silver Creek?" A shadow crossed his face. "After Elizabeth, my wife, died, I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Too many memories. Packed up and headed west. Found Silver Creek by chance 3 years ago." "And stayed." He nodded. "It's a good town with good people. Needed a blacksmith, and I needed a fresh start." Victoria understood that need all too well. "Does it get easier?" she asked softly. "The loss?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. "Not easier," he finally said. "Different. The sharp pain dulls to an ache. You learn to carry it with you rather than being crushed by it." His honesty was oddly comforting. Not false reassurances that time would heal all wounds, but an acknowledgement that grief changed rather than disappeared. For the next week, they fell into a routine. Victoria would spend her days organizing the store and learning the inventory, while Sam would arrive in the evenings to help with the heavier tasks and teach her the basics of running a business. "You need to mark up the goods at least 20% over what you paid," he explained one evening as they worked on pricing. "More for luxury items, less for necessities." Victoria jotted notes in a ledger. "How do I know what people can afford to pay?" "You get to know your customers. The miners will spend freely when they come to town, while the ranch hands are more careful with their money. The families that farm outside of town trade more than they buy." "It's overwhelming," Victoria admitted. Sam looked at her with unexpected gentleness. "You're doing better than you think. You have a good head for numbers." His confidence in her abilities warmed something in Victoria's chest, a feeling that both comforted and alarmed her. It seemed disloyal to find any joy so soon after Thomas's death. "We should finish for tonight," she said abruptly, closing the ledger. "You must be tired after working all day." Sam studied her face for a moment, as if sensing her withdrawal. "A bit. We made good progress today, though. I think you could open by the end of next week." The prospect both excited and terrified Victoria. Opening the store would be fulfilling Thomas's dream, but it would also be a step toward accepting her new life, a life without him. "Thank you, Sam. I couldn't have done this without your help." "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Victoria." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it hung in the air between them, intimate and unexpected. "You would have found a way." After Sam left, Victoria sat alone in the quiet store, surrounded by the fruits of their labor. Shelves lined with goods, organized and labeled. The counter polished and ready for customers. It was taking shape, becoming real. becoming hers, not just Thomas's. The realization brought a fresh wave of grief, but also a strange, tentative hope. The day Flanders's general store officially opened dawned clear and warm. Victoria had barely slept, alternating between anxiety about running the business and guilt that she was moving forward without Thomas. She opened the doors at 8 o'clock, as Sam had advised, and waited nervously behind the counter. Her first customer was Maggie Peterson, who made a show of needing several items but was clearly there to offer moral support. Then came the blacksmith's apprentice, sent by Sam for some supplies. By midday, word had spread, and a steady stream of townspeople came to see the new store and its widowed proprietress. Victoria found herself drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She smiled, made change, wrapped purchases, and answered questions. Each successful transaction built her confidence a little more. In the late afternoon, when the rush had slowed, Sam appeared in the doorway. He looked around at the half-empty shelves and nodded appreciatively. "Looks like a successful first day," he said, approaching the counter. Victoria allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "It was. Better than I expected." "Not surprising. People have been waiting for a proper store to reopen." He looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. "How are you holding up?" "Tired," she admitted. "But good, I think. It feels right to be doing something useful." "Thought you might be too busy for a proper meal today." Sam produced a wrapped package from his satchel. "Nothing fancy, just some of Maggie's stew and bread." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought an unexpected lump to Victoria's throat. "That's very kind of you." "Least I could do?" He glanced around the store again. "Need help restocking before tomorrow?" And so began another routine. Sam would stop by the store most evenings, sometimes to help with heavy lifting or repairs, sometimes just to check on her. He never stayed too long, never presumed too much, but his steady presence became something Victoria found herself looking forward to. Weeks passed, and summer settled over Silver Creek. The store prospered under Victoria's increasingly confident management. She learned her customers' needs and preferences, adjusted her inventory accordingly, and even began taking special orders. The townspeople, initially drawn by curiosity, returned for her fair prices and growing knowledge of her stock. On a particularly hot July evening, Victoria was tallying the day's receipts when Sam arrived. He carried a small wooden box under one arm. "Thought you might like this," he said, placing it on the counter. "Made it in my spare time." Victoria opened the box to find a beautifully crafted cash drawer with compartments for different denominations and a hidden section for important papers. "Sam, it's perfect." She ran her fingers over the smooth wood, admiring the craftsmanship. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come to the town social on Saturday," he replied, then quickly added, "The whole town will be there. Music, dancing, food. Good for business to socialize with customers." Victoria hesitated. She hadn't attended any social function since arriving in Silver Creek. It seemed wrong somehow, as if enjoying herself would dishonor Thomas's memory. Seeing her reluctance, Sam continued gently, "I'm not asking to court you, Victoria, just to spend an evening in the company of neighbors." His understanding of her conflict touched her. "I'll think about it." On Saturday evening, Victoria stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, smoothing the skirt of her blue dress, the only one she owned that wasn't black or gray. 4 months had passed since Thomas's death. The raw wound of grief had formed a tender scar still painful to touch, but no longer bleeding. She made her way to the town square, where lanterns had been strung between trees and tables laden with food lined one side. A makeshift platform held a small band of local musicians, and several couples were already dancing. Victoria felt conspicuous and out of place until Maggie Peterson bustled over, linking arms with her. "So glad you came, dear. Come meet everyone properly." For the next hour, Victoria was introduced to townspeople she knew only as customers. She found herself smiling genuinely as she conversed, surprised by how many people expressed admiration for how she'd handled the store. Mrs. Flanders. She turned to find Sam standing behind her, more formally dressed than she'd ever seen him, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. Mr. Easton. She couldn't help returning his smile. Would you do me the honor of a dance? He extended his hand. Victoria hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. I'm afraid I'm out of practice. Fortunately, I'm not much of a dancer myself, so you'll be in good company. He led her to the dancing area as the musicians began a waltz. Sam placed his hand respectfully at her waist, keeping a proper distance between them as they began to move to the music. You're doing fine, he assured her as they turned among the other couples. Only because you're leading so well, Victoria replied. For someone who claims not to be much of a dancer, you seem quite capable. A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. Elizabeth insisted I learn. Said she wouldn't marry a man who couldn't dance at his own wedding. Victoria felt a small pang at the casual mention of his late wife. You must have loved her very much. I did. His voice was gentle. Just as you loved Thomas. The simple acknowledgement of their parallel losses created an understanding between them that went beyond words. They continued dancing, the music wrapping around them like a protective cocoon. When the dance ended, Sam led her to get some punch, then found a quiet spot away from the crowds. Thank you for coming tonight, he said. I know it wasn't easy. Victoria looked out at the celebrating townspeople. Actually, it's been nicer than I expected. I've been so focused on the store, I haven't really gotten to know people. People respect you, you know. Coming here alone, making a success of the business despite everything. She shook her head slightly. I wasn't alone. I had help. She glanced at him. I had you. Something shifted in Sam's eyes, a warmth that made Victoria look away, suddenly self-conscious. I should probably head back, she said. Early morning tomorrow. I'll walk you home. They strolled in comfortable silence through the town, the sounds of the social fading behind them. At her door, Victoria turned to thank him. I enjoyed this evening, she said truthfully. Thank you for encouraging me to come. I'm glad you did. He hesitated, then added, Good night, Victoria. As summer gave way to autumn, Victoria found herself increasingly caught between conflicting emotions. Her grief for Thomas remained, a faithful companion, but alongside it grew a warmth for Sam that couldn't be denied. His daily visits had become the highlight of her days, their conversations ranging from business matters to personal philosophies to childhood memories. One cool September evening, as they sat on the bench outside her store watching the sunset paint the western sky, Sam turned to her with unusual seriousness. Victoria, there's something I need to tell you. A flutter of anxiety passed through her. What is it? I've been offered a job in Denver, a big metalworks factory. They need someone to oversee the forge operations. Victoria felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. I see. When would you leave? That's just it. I haven't accepted yet. His eyes searched hers. I wanted to talk to you first. Why? The question came out more sharply than she intended. Sam took a deep breath. Because what I decide depends partly on you. Victoria stood abruptly, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. I don't understand what you mean. I think you do. Sam rose to stand beside her. I care for you, Victoria, more than as a friend. But I would never presume to. Stop, she interrupted, her voice trembling. Please don't say anything more. Pain flashed across his face. I'm sorry. I've overstepped. It's not that, Victoria said, struggling to articulate the tangled emotions inside her. It's just, I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Sam nodded slowly. I understand, and I respect that completely. He put his hat on, preparing to leave. I won't mention it again. How soon do you need to decide about Denver? Victoria asked, suddenly afraid of his departure. They want an answer within the month. A month. 4 short weeks before she might lose the person who had become her closest friend, her support, her... She couldn't complete the thought. I should go, Sam said, his voice carefully neutral. Good night, Victoria. For the next week, an uncomfortable distance grew between them. Sam still stopped by the store, but their easy conversations had become stilted and formal. Victoria found herself missing him even as she stood right in front of her. One afternoon, as she was closing up, Sheriff Wilson entered the store with a grim expression. Mrs. Flanders, I think you should sit down. Victoria's heart raced. What's happened? We caught one of the men who robbed your stagecoach, the one who shot your husband. The world seemed to tilt. Where is he? In my jail. His partners abandoned him after he was shot in another robbery attempt. He's not going to make it through the night. The sheriff hesitated. He's asking to speak with you. Says he wants to make peace before he meets his maker. Victoria's hands trembled. I don't know if I can face him. You don't have to. But I thought you should know. After the sheriff left, Victoria paced the store, emotions warring within her. Seeing her husband's killer seemed unbearable, yet the thought of not going, of missing whatever confession or explanation he might offer, was equally impossible. Almost without conscious decision, she found herself walking toward Sam's forge. He looked up from his work as she entered, surprise evident on his face. Victoria, is everything all right? The concern in his voice broke through her composure. They caught him, the man who killed Thomas. The words tumbled out along with the story Sheriff Wilson had told her. Sam set down his tools and moved toward her, stopping just short of taking her hands. What do you want to do? I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to see him, to understand why he did it. Part of me never wants to lay eyes on him. Whatever you decide, you don't have to face it alone. His voice was steady, reassuring. I'll go with you, if you want. Victoria looked at this man who had been her constant support through the darkest period of her life. Yes, please. The walk to the jailhouse seemed both endless and too short. Sam's solid presence beside her was the only thing that kept Victoria moving forward. Inside, Sheriff Wilson led them to a cell where a gaunt man lay on a cot. His breathing labored, a blood-stained bandage around his abdomen. Mrs. Flanders is here, the sheriff announced. The dying man turned his head weakly. You're his widow? Victoria could only nod, her throat too tight for words. I'm sorry, he rasped. For what it's worth. Wasn't supposed to be killing, just robbery. Why did you shoot him then? Victoria's voice was barely audible. Panicked, he reached for his gun. A rattling cough shook his frail body. Not making excuses. Just want to die with a clean conscience. Victoria stared at this broken man who had shattered her life with a single bullet. She had imagined him as a monster, but here was just a human being, a criminal. Yes, but still flesh and blood, facing his own mortality. I forgive you, she said, the words surprising her as much as everyone else in the room. Not for you, for me, so I can move on. The man closed his eyes, tears leaking from beneath his lids. Thank you, madam. Outside the jailhouse, Victoria took her first deep breath since entering. Sam stood quietly beside her, waiting. I didn't know I was going to say that, she finally said. About forgiving him. Did you mean it? Victoria considered the question carefully. Yes. Not completely, perhaps, but enough to start. Enough to stop letting that moment define my whole life. They walked slowly back toward her store, the setting sun casting long shadows across the street. Thank you for coming with me, Victoria said. I couldn't have done it alone. Sam nodded. You're one of the strongest people I've ever known, Victoria. She stopped walking and turned to face him. I've been unfair to you. About Denver. You don't owe me anything. Please let me finish. Victoria gathered her courage. When you told me you might leave, I realized how much I've come to depend on you. Not just your help with the store, but your friendship, your presence in my life. She took a deep breath. I'm not ready to call it love yet. It's too soon, and I'm still healing. But I care for you, Sam. Deeply. And the thought of you leaving hurts more than I want to admit. The hope that dawned in his eyes made her heart race. What are you saying, Victoria? I'm saying don't go to Denver. Not yet. Give me time. Give us time to see what might grow between us. Sam took her hand gently in his. I told them I needed a month to decide. I think we could learn a lot about each other in a month. Victoria smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile she'd given him. I'd like that. That month became a time of careful courtship. Sam would take Victoria on proper outings, Sunday picnics by the creek, walks in the foothills as the aspens turned golden, suppers at Maggie's boarding house. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, hopes, and fears. Victoria spoke of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her brief teaching career before meeting Thomas, their whirlwind romance and dreams of Western adventure. Sam shared tales of his youth at the trading post, his blacksmithing apprenticeship, his 5 happy years with Elizabeth before the influenza epidemic that had claimed her life. They bonded over their shared experiences of love and loss, finding comfort in the understanding that neither expected the other to forget their first love. There was room in the heart, they discovered, for honoring the past while building something new. As October arrived with its crisp mornings and brilliant foliage, Sam invited Victoria to dinner at his small house on the edge of town. He had spent days preparing, cleaning the modest 2-room cabin and planning a special meal. I'm not much of a cook, he admitted as he served her a simple but tasty stew. But I wanted to show you my home. Victoria looked around the cabin, noting the practical furnishings softened by small touches, a quilt over the chair, books stacked neatly on a shelf, a vase of autumn wildflowers on the table. It's lovely, she said sincerely. It feels like you. After dinner, they sat before the fire, the comfortable silence between them broken only by the crackling flames. The month is almost up, Victoria said softly. Have you decided about Denver? Sam turned to her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. I think you know my answer. Silver Creek is my home now. Everything I want is here. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Victoria reached out and took his hand, a gesture that had become familiar, yet still sent a thrill through her each time. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to start again, she said. When I came here with Thomas, I thought our future was set. Then, in an instant, it was gone. She squeezed his hand. What I've learned since then is that the future is never guaranteed. All we can do is make the most of each day we're given. Sam's voice was gentle. And how do you want to spend those days, Victoria? She met his gaze steadily. With you, if you'll have me. Not right away, I still need time. But someday soon, I think I could be ready to build a new life. A different one than I planned, but perhaps just as beautiful in its own way. Sam brought her hand to his lips, pressing a tender kiss to her knuckles. I would wait as long as needed. There's no rush. Victoria felt something shift inside her, the final piece of her grief transforming into acceptance, making room for new hope. I don't want to wait too long. Life is precious and uncertain, as we both know too well. The first snow of winter dusted Silver Creek in early December. Victoria stood in her store, arranging a display of Christmas goods that had arrived on the morning stage. The bell over the door jingled as Sam entered, brushing snow from his coat. "Getting colder out there," he said, warming his hands by the stove. "Think we're in for a real storm tonight." Victoria nodded, finishing her arrangement of candy canes and small toys. The stage driver said the same. "Last one until after Christmas, likely." Sam wandered over to examine her handiwork. "Looks nice. The children will be excited about these." "I thought so too." Victoria smiled, enjoying his approval. Over the past months, the store had truly become hers, reflecting her taste and understanding of the community's needs. Sam hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I have something for you. An early Christmas gift." He handed her a small wooden box, exquisitely carved with a pattern of wildflowers. Victoria opened it carefully to find a silver locket on a delicate chain. "Sam, it's beautiful. Open it," he urged softly. Inside the locket was a tiny photograph of Thomas, carefully cut to fit the small space. Victoria looked up at Sam in wonder. "How did you—" "You had that portrait in your sitting room. I borrowed it briefly, had a photographer in Santa Fe make a miniature copy." Sam's eyes were tender. "I thought you might like to keep him close to your heart." Tears welled in Victoria's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift, not just the locket itself, but the acknowledgement of Thomas's place in her life. "This is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Sam helped her fasten the locket around her neck. "There's something else I wanted to ask you," he said, his voice suddenly nervous. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Victoria's breath caught. Although their relationship had deepened over the autumn months, with increasingly tender moments shared between them, this formal proposal still took her by surprise. Sam continued quickly. "I know it might seem soon to some, but I think we both understand how precious time is. I love you, Victoria. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you've built something beautiful from tragedy." Victoria touched the locket at her throat, feeling the comforting weight of it against her skin. Thomas would always be part of her, but her heart had expanded to include this remarkable man standing before her. "Yes," she said simply. "I will marry you, Sam Easton." His face lit with joy as he gathered her gently in his arms. Their first kiss was tender and sweet, a promise of the life they would build together. They were married on New Year's Day, 1876, in the small church on the hill overlooking Silver Creek. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, the community that had embraced Victoria in her darkest hour now celebrating her new beginning. Victoria wore a dress of deep blue velvet, with Thomas's locket visible at her throat, a symbol of her past honored even as she stepped into her future. Sam stood tall and proud in a new suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle toward him. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, spoken with the wisdom of those who understood both love and loss. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Sam kissed her with a gentle passion that promised a lifetime of care and devotion. At the small reception in the town hall, Maggie Peterson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Such a beautiful couple. And after all you've both been through." Sheriff Wilson raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings and second chances." Later, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Sam held Victoria close. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. Victoria looked up at this man who had helped her rebuild her life piece by piece. "More than I ever thought possible again." "I want to make you a promise," Sam said, his voice low and intense. "I can't guarantee what the future holds, no one can, but I swear to you, Victoria Easton, that as long as I draw breath, you will never lose your future again. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The promise, simple yet profound, settled into Victoria's heart like a cornerstone upon which everything else could be built. "Together," she agreed. Spring came early to Silver Creek in 1876. The hills greened quickly after the winter snows, wildflowers carpeting the meadows in a riot of color. Victoria stood on the porch of their home, Sam's cabin expanded and improved, with his skilled hands watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Sam joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts?" Victoria leaned into his embrace. "I was thinking about how much has changed in a year. Last spring, I thought my life was over. Now." "Now?" Sam prompted gently. She turned in his arms, a smile illuminating her face. "Now I know it was just beginning." Her hand drifted to her abdomen, where the first subtle signs of new life were making themselves known. "Our child will be born by Christmas." The joy that spread across Sam's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "A baby? Are you certain?" Victoria nodded, her own happiness reflecting his. "Maggie confirmed it yesterday." Sam lifted her in a gentle embrace, laughing with pure delight. "A child," he whispered in wonder. "Our child." As he set her carefully back on her feet, Victoria saw tears in his eyes. "After Elizabeth died, I never thought I'd have a family again." "Nor I, after Thomas." Victoria touched the locket she still wore. "Life has strange and beautiful ways of surprising us." They stood together as twilight deepened into night, the first stars appearing overhead. Below them, the lights of Silver Creek twinkled like earthbound stars, the town that had become their home. "I used to be so afraid of the future," Victoria said softly. "Now I can't wait to see what it holds." Sam kissed her tenderly. "Whatever it holds, we'll face it together. That's my promise to you yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." Victoria nestled against his shoulder, secure in the knowledge that while life offered no certainties, the love they had found was strong enough to weather whatever storms might come. From the ashes of loss, they had built something precious and enduring. Not a replacement for what had been lost, but something new and equally valuable. As night fell fully over the New Mexico territory, Victoria Easton stood embraced by her husband, her hand resting on the child growing within her, her heart full of gratitude for second chances and the courage to embrace them. The years that followed brought both joy and challenges to the Eastons. Their daughter, Elizabeth Thomas Easton, was born on a snowy December night in 1876, bringing light and laughter to their home. Sam's blacksmith business thrived as Silver Creek grew, while Victoria's store became a cornerstone of the community. 2 years later, their son Samuel arrived, completing their family. The children grew strong and healthy, with Elizabeth inheriting her mother's quiet determination and Samuel showing his father's gentle strength. Through it all, Sam kept his promise. Whatever difficulties arose, a fire that damaged the store, a mining accident that injured Sam's arm, the scarlet fever that threatened young Samuel, they faced them together, their love deepening through each trial overcome. On their 10th anniversary, Sam presented Victoria with a hand-forged iron rose, delicate despite its medium, with a single word engraved on the stem: "Together." Victoria placed it on the mantel beside the photographs of their family, including one of Thomas, always honored as part of their story. "The most beautiful gift," she said, "was the day you walked into my store and offered to help a grieving widow." Sam took her hands in his. "And the most beautiful gift you gave me was the courage to love again." Outside their window, Silver Creek had grown from a small town to a bustling community. The railroad had arrived, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Through it all, the Eastons had remained a steady presence, the blacksmith and the shopkeeper who had found love after loss. "Do you ever wonder," Victoria asked, "what might have happened if I'd sold the store and gone back east? If you'd taken that job in Denver?" Sam shook his head. "Some things are meant to be, I think. Different paths might have led us to different lives, but I believe we would have found each other somehow." Victoria smiled at the romantic notion, so characteristic of her pragmatic husband's hidden depths. I'm glad we didn't have to test that theory. As the children burst in from playing outside, bringing with them the noise and energy of youth, Victoria felt the familiar swell of gratitude for this life she had never expected, but had grown to cherish beyond measure. Sam caught her eye across the room, his smile still able to quicken her heart after a decade together. In that moment, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that while the pain of loss never fully disappeared, it had been transformed into something precious and appreciation for every moment, every smile, every touch. The future, once feared and uncertain, now stretched before them full of promise, not because it offered any guarantees, but because they would walk its path together, hand in hand, hearts intertwined. And in the end, that was all the promise either of them needed.